Brilliant, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just want to follow up on some of Sarah's points. Before I do, last week I was at the Suffolk Water Abstractors Group, ESWAG. Okay. So it's very timely to have this conversation, and I know they'll be delighted with your recognition that you just made about valuing food security and not just talking about the kind of water as the public good point, but having a broader view on it. And to that point, I just want to dig a little bit deeper on the assessment of the value of water and how water is valued, and if the department has looked at how it's valued. ESWAG came out with a report this week looking at the value of water in Suffolk and Norfolk and the consequences of water. We're a dry region, as you know, and with all the cuts to licences and abstractions, the impact that could have on our regional economy could be from anything from 1.2 billion up to 2.3 billion over a 20-year period on the supply chain, on agriculture, and on the wider rural economy. So I'm just wondering if you as a department have looked at the value of water and how that interplays across a whole range of different sectors.
You're so right. You're absolutely right. And as I say, it underpins everything. So I'm genuinely so pleased to still be here. Because it's so fundamentally important to absolutely everything. And we only realise it's fundamentally important when we have the driest spring since 1893. How important water is. So I think water resilience is one of my top priorities, and we're looking at all of these reforms, we're looking at the white paper, we're looking at the water industry, but fundamentally, how do we as a country make ourselves more resilient to our changing climate and to what's happening with water is got to be really key, and that's looking at addressing assets, that's looking at addressing asset health, that's looking at how we move water around, that's looking at leakage, that's all of these things. But it's also, as I say, looking at customer behaviour, but they all need to be taken into account, because I think you only truly value, like with many things we might say, Chair, we only truly value things when we don't have them.
Yeah. And to your point earlier about we now worry in your new role about dry summers. I worry, obviously as a rural constituency with lots of farmers, I worry about dry summers, and the moment it rains, I'm terrified of flooding. So it's this continual battle of
absolutely,
of being out of kilter with it. I want to talk more about abstractions, and I've met with many farmers in East Suffolk. As I said, I've met with around 100 at the weekend that have raised continually issues with licensing. So we have licenses that are being revoked, that are being taken away, abstraction licenses are being taken away, but there's no certainty with timings for that. And now we know that eventually lots of farms in my area won't be able to abstract water. They know that, they're getting their head around it, and they're being incredibly agile in the ways they're bringing forward solutions. And I want to raise a few examples with you, but I also want to talk about some of the challenges that we've seen in the system. So one man's flood is another man's opportunity, and when we have wet winters, I think of my constituency, but I know this is true across the country, what more we could be doing to collect that rainwater. Yes. I know that we've had my constituents, farmers have had many conversations over the years with the EA about that, and it's just gone into a spiralling, slow conversation that never allows them to take advantage of that rainwater. So what more can we do to look at those EA licences to abstract that rainwater, to hold it on reservoirs or potentially in other ways, in order to make sure that we can avoid the impact of flooding and it be a win-win for farming as well.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. Completely and utterly right. And that is part of being more resilient. Because if you can hold the rainwater when it falls, that makes you more resilient for the drier summers. So you're absolutely right. I know the EA have been sort of piloting some examples around the country, sort of looking at what more they can do to support farmers in helping with that resilience. There's some work ongoing, and I'm happy to sort of send details in or chat to you more about it later. And you're right on the abstraction, and that is simply the Environment Agency always needs to weigh up what's happening with the environment as well as the needs of farmers, and it is always really, really, really difficult. And I know particularly at the moment, root vegetable crops, they're finding it very, very hard because the ground is so hard to take that out without bruising them. So I'm very live to that current concern that farmers have had, and that, and I do want to recognise, Chair, they've had a horrific year with the floods that they've had followed by the drought. So I think this whole resilience picture, thinking about what I would call it, I sort of talk in the department, and David heard me bend his ear about this many times, the management of water. Yeah. How are we managing water in an area. How are we effectively managing when we have too much, when we have too little? How are we managing water? And I think that's what we need to be thinking about.
Brilliant. Just quickly on abstractions a bit more. We have heard many concerns about the abstraction licences and they're being poorly monitored, poorly enforced. What are the timescales, if any, for reform of that system?
Well, I'd say I'm happy to go away and sort of look at the evidence you've had of where, the examples of where they've been badly monitored and badly enforced, and sort of get back to you on those specifics, if that's okay.
Thank you. And before I hand over, Chair, can I just mention two incredible schemes in my constituency, which I'd be really keen to talk to you about further. One is the HydroCycle in Felixstowe, which you may be aware of, and it's a programme that I think has been inspired many others and is a genuine opportunity. It was brought about by 6 farmers coming together, working really well with the EA and with other stakeholder organisations. It basically recycles groundwater to a certain extent, or rainwater, during the winter, stores it on the farms. And we're obviously a flood risk area, but also a coastal area. All that water, the vast majority of that water, if not all of that water, was being pumped into the North Sea. So it's a win-win for erosion, and it's a win-win in order to the pumping of it into the North Sea also facilitated or accelerated erosion. But we're also able to support farmers across a whole footprint. So I'd love to share that more with you. I'd also like to brief and get your opinions on it. I'd also like to mention the Managed Aquifer Recharge trial, which is being talked about more in my constituency, and people are starting to trial it. It's essentially a subterranean reservoir. So taking water, and rather than storing it on ground, above ground, storing it underground, essentially within the water table, and then pumping it back up. So the physical footprint of it is much smaller and also for planning perspective, it is much easier. But I'd be really delighted to share those two with you, and perhaps even see if we can get you down to do a visit. But those are two initiatives that farmers are working incredibly closely with EA and other stakeholders, and are the best examples of innovation.
I love it. I think that sounds super exciting. I think that's a perfect example of where we want to. It's completely about building resilience, isn't it? And everyone becoming more resilient. So I'll have to don my wellies and come and visit.
Are you done, Julie? Thanks.